Yeah, I mean, that's really was a nice thing of Randy to say, but you know, there's been a lot of people involved in the grain movement in Vermont in particular, and I would say, you know, I've listed just some of them, but myself and Susan and Erica that are both sitting back there have been really helpful in getting all these projects started, as well as the rest of my team as well, some that are still here and some that have moved on to new projects. And of course, Jack Glazer, he really was the primary farmer that was very, very much interested in plant breeding itself, and still remains to be very interested in that, and has been our #1 collaborator in terms of just, you know, keeping us going, keeping us interested, getting us interested to begin with. Oh, I should also know that I'm not a plant breeder. So, you know, you can do anything you want, really. You can be a wrestler, you can be a plant breeder. I don't know what I'm going to be next week, but anyway. And then Ben Gleason also, who's been growing grains in Vermont for quite a while, was also very interested in variety development, and Ken Van Hazenga, and then several others as well. But I would really, you know, credit Jack Glazer for the person that really got this project going and had, you know, the passion behind it, and gave me the courage to actually, I guess, stand up here and talk about a plant breeding project, because I'm not a plant breeder. And then Northeast SARE provided the first initial funding for this project through a farmer grant that was, you know, the title of it was a Farmer Breeding Club for Vermont. And so I'm just going to talk about that project. I know some of you have already heard this story, so I apologize for that. But it continues. So you might have heard it in 2006, and now it's 2011, and we're still going. So the interest is still there, and we've actually made progress, and it's really exciting. Down. Okay, so the goal of our wheat breeding project was to develop varieties that perform well in our climate, which means Vermont. And even when you go from northern to southern Vermont, from northern Vermont to, you know, northern New York or northwestern New York, it's very, very different. And so, you know, just having varieties that are developed in New York for Vermont, even those aren't always the best adapted. And so really, I think what everyone's interest is to sort of develop our own varieties for our farms. And wouldn't it be nice if each farm really had its own variety very well adapted to that microregion. And many of the farms were really interested in using genetics from the past. And there's so many projects that are going on, and Ellie, of course, has been really sort of one of the main drivers for this for a long time, is bringing back some of the heritage varieties and growing those up. But what some of the farmers were interested in was taking some of those genetics and combining them with some of the modern day genetics to see if we could come up with our new history. You know, we kind of look at it that way, that it's really great to go back and look at the historical varieties, but maybe it's time for us to start making our own history and combining some of our Vermont genetics with newer genetics, and then, you know, 100 years from now, someone will be standing up here like me saying, yeah, we grew that variety from 2012 that they released 100 years ago, and it's way better than what we have now, you know. So we're hoping in some ways to make our own history, to leave our own legacy, to develop something that's really good for us. And then, of course, to develop varieties that meet the needs of the markets. So for the bakers, for the consumer, and the markets we don't even know about yet, right, Klaus? Okay. No, I shouldn't be chewing this gum. Very rude. Can you hear it? Oh, I just swallowed it. Yeah, I did that. I've swallowed a lot of gum in my days. All right. So again, like I was saying, you know, Ellie has really started with the heirloom varieties and the heritage varieties, and you know, really helped us find some varieties that were developed in Vermont quite a long time ago, in the sort of late 1800s, by Cyrus Pringle, who was from Charlotte, Vermont. And really nobody in Vermont really knew who he was. Even some of the people at the university didn't know, even though there's an herbarium named after him. He's really probably more famous, at least to most people, as a botanist, collecting ferns, I think,
for acid gray and
yeah, in Arizona and Mexico, than he is for wheat breeding. But then when I met Steve Jones, or I've actually known Steve for a long time, but we started talking about this, and he said, oh yeah, some of this Cyrus Pringle guy, you know, he's famous. He's the father of wheat breeding. And, you know, so apparently only wheat breeders know about Cyrus Pringle and that he's famous, and the people in Vermont don't, but now they do, right? He's become famed once again. And so he released 3 wheat varieties, Surprise, Champlain, and Defiance. And what Steve told me was that Defiance was actually one of the most widely adapted varieties across the United States, and it was very widely grown in California for quite some time. I think he almost said 40 or 50 years. It was a very popular variety. And Champlain, of course, we love Champlain because of Lake Champlain, and if there was anything that we really wanted to do was try to bring this back into production, because of its name. And then, and the other varieties as well, but for whatever reason, I love Champlain. Oh, another thing I should note too is that what was really interesting to me is that a lot of the varieties that were from Vermont were spring wheat varieties, even though spring wheat's not all that common anymore, a little bit, but it's difficult to grow. But it just kind of shows you, I think, how the climate has really changed. And some of the historical research that I did, looking in newspapers and things like that from that time, the climate was very different. It was a lot colder, and I think that it was very difficult for winter wheat to actually overwinter. And really up until probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, Jack Laser, who's up in the Northeast Kingdom, really couldn't even get winter wheat to survive all that well. So the climate has changed quite a bit, and I kind of wonder if that's why spring wheat was what we find most generally coming out of Vermont. And there are some winter wheats that Ellie's found too, but spring wheat's probably the primary types. So that's why we were working on that. And this is really interesting. I think Frank Kutka passed this on to me that, you know, there were actually manuals. This was kind of popular, you know, again, a number of years ago, where you actually trained farmers how to be plant breeders, and we don't really do that anymore, although we're trying. And so, you know, we're going back, I guess, trying to figure out how to do it again. I'm not the best person to train farmers on how to be a plant breeder, but anyway, somebody's got to do it. Okay, so how did we learn to be plant breeders? In about 2 days, right, we were certified plant breeders. Jack, myself, and Seth Johnson, who's there, another farmer, took a trip to Washington State. Steve actually offered up his services. Really wonderful person if you don't know him. Very generous with his time. Very committed to working with farmers to develop varieties. And he trained us how to be wheat breeders. Like I said, actually, in, I think it was about 4 hours. I was the best at emasculating wheat. I do have to say that. Jack was a failure. He admits it to this day. He just really had trouble pulling the boy parts out of the wheat, and I was just, you know, like a pro. I don't know what it was, but look at us. So we had a lot of great training. We learned how to make the crosses, and then Steve sent us on our way with some supplies we packed into our carry-ons, and we were sent home to actually make our own crosses with some photographs. He sent those with us, and so we tried. And there we are. Now, I guess, and Julie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of this actually happens in greenhouses now, right? They don't, I don't know, they must have done it in the field at some point. Well, we are slow to, you know, we should have stayed for an extra day to get that part, I guess. But so, has anybody ever been to Jack Laser's farm on the top of that mountain? Okay. You know how windy and cold it is up there. So there's our little test plots. We had these 19 different wheat varieties that we were going to use for our crosses up on the top of the mountain in probably the windiest place on the entire farm. And, you know, it looks like a nice day there, and we're out there making these crosses, and Susan did a lot of that. Eric, I don't know if you were there that first year, and I can't even remember how many we did, but we spent days doing it. And I think the night after we finished, there was a huge storm that came through with, I don't know, 60-mile-an-hour winds. It was after that Jack put up his windmill. But, you know, and all the little baggies, they were in, you know, his neighboring field, and we were so disappointed. We worked so hard, and so anyway, you know, we learned that these things are best done in some kind of enclosed area. Is this correct? We need cages. Nobody told me about the cages. I wish someone would have told us about the cages. So anyway, in these crosses, we had these 19 wheat varieties. We had the Cyrus Pringles wheat. We had some heirlooms from, they weren't from North Dakota, but they were sent to us from Steve Zwinger at North Dakota State. We had 9 varieties that were sent to us from Washington State. Again, they weren't all from Washington, but they were primarily heirlooms. And 2 modern day wheats, let's see, AC Berry and Scarlet. Okay, 1996 release and a 1980 release, I think. Okay, and we planted out these seeds. We didn't have a lot of them, like Takeshi was saying. You get about 100 seeds from the gene bank, so we didn't have a lot to work with. But we put them out there and made our crosses and failed. It was a bummer. I mean, this looks good. We were pretty excited. There's Surprise. There's AC Berry. We took a lot of pictures and everything. But again, none of our crosses were successful. The only success we had, and I took this picture out because I didn't think I would have time, was this air gut fungal propagule that I swear to, it was probably that long. That was the only success we had. No seed, just a big ergot fungus propagule. So we were very disappointed. No tears were shed, but disappointed from all the hard work that we had. The exciting thing was that we saw these heirloom wheats growing, and we were starting to build up our seed supply or populations. So we were going from 100 seeds now to, you know, up to a pound in some cases, or 2 pounds. So as Ellie was saying, you know, just building the amount of seed that we have so that we could share it with other people. 100 seeds isn't a lot, and so we wanted to build up those seed lots so that heirlooms could also be distributed. So what did we do? This wasn't the end, because remember I said I think this was 2006 or something like that. Oh, here's a picture of us working on it. And Jack making his cross. Well, we had so many pictures. No success, though. So what we did, again, we called Steve, and we were all bummed out. He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Tell me what it was you wanted to make crosses of. Send me the seed that you harvested." We harvested that heirloom seed, and I will make Julie make the crosses for me in the green. No, I think it might have been Kevin or Steve Lyons or somebody. And so he actually made the crosses for us in his greenhouse that winter. And then sent the seed back to us, and we put those crosses out in the field in 2008. Okay, so that was 2007, not 2006. Time flies, you know. So those were the crosses that he made for us, and you can see we have AC Berry in there quite a bit, because AC Berry is a really common spring wheat variety that's grown in Vermont, and it's actually the favored variety of many of the grain growers in Quebec. And then Red Fife, which is a favorite of Jack's and many folks. And then we had Champlain in there a couple of times, Defiance, and Surprise, because we wanted to actually try to improve Cyrus Pringle's varieties, because one thing that we noticed right away was that Defiance had very poor standability. And even though it seemed, you know, Steve told us it was the best one, it actually was the worst one for us. And we couldn't bear the fact that we had to give up on it. So we thought if we crossed it with a modern day variety, it might improve its standability. Okay, so those are the varieties and the years that we found that they were developed. And Steve made the crosses, and then we planted those crosses out in 2008. There's just some pictures of that. And so our rows were pretty small again, and then we harvested the seed in 2008. And that's now so, you know, I'm not a plant breeder, so the F1 was in 2008, and the F2 we planted out in 2009. Am I on the right track here? And then we harvested the F2s, and then we planted out the F3s in 2010. And what was really exciting about that was that Steve said we could actually start selecting from the F3s. And at least from what I understood in your presentation, that's what you were sending out to your farms, was the F3s. Is that correct, in France? So we were finally at this F3 stage, And what Steve guided us to do was to actually now take that seed and put it on 2 different farms. So we put some of the seed at Jack's, put it out in replicated plots, who's up in the Northeast Kingdom on some bony, gravelly soils. And then we took the other half of the seed and we brought it to Ben Gleason, who's in the Champlain Valley on really heavy clay soils with a warmer climate. To see if these crosses would perform differently under these different climates. And they have to some extent. So in 2010 and now into 2011, so there's Ben and Ken going out and making their selections. We had, we were so busy that day, they were out making the selections, and I said, Erica, get out there and get a picture before it's all done. You know, the most exciting part was them actually going through the process of picking out what they liked, putting the heads in bags, and then we were saving that seed. So again, I'm not a plant breeder, so if I'm saying something totally that it's not, no, I'm not, okay. I feel like we email Steve at least 2 or 3 times going, now what do we do? You know, now what do we do? And one thing that I've noticed right away is how big and expansive and expensive a wheat breeding program can become really quickly. Okay, so we have 10 crosses that were, you know, just a handful of seeds. You know, we put those F1s out, and you know, then we harvested more seed, and then we had a little more seed, and we put out bigger plots into these F2 populations, and they were sort of replicated. But we have no idea what we're doing. Okay, it's working though. And then we harvested that, and then we have this F3, and now we can separate out this seed. We have these replicated plots. Some of them are rather large. Steve said just go as big as you can go. And now we have more seed. We're better able to evaluate the crosses because they're growing on a bigger area. And we were able, well, we were actually really excited that we were able to put out bigger plots this year because we wanted to test for quality. We also wanted to do baking tests, except that it was the absolute worst growing season of how many years. And all of our hard work and efforts were almost lost in 2011.
Selected for bad weather jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost done. Okay. So anyway, so the farmers have been making their selections. They're going around picking, and Steve told us have them pick 10 heads per, you know, the cross of the ones that they like, and put them in a bag and mark the bag, and then we save that seed, and now we're planting that seed out, and oh my goodness, I mean, this thing's out of control. So, you know, I don't even know where to go from here at this point, except that it seemed very overwhelming in 2010 or 2010, and it seemed like I actually really ready to kind of quit it because I just couldn't see how we could really keep this thing going. It is a lot of work, you know, and it's a lot of work for the farmers, and it's a lot of work for us because as much as you just want the farmers to take it over, there's still, you know, there's all these different pieces that as researchers we need to do. But then Steve showed up and he walked through our crosses and he said, that one's almost ready to release, you know, and all of a sudden just all of our enthusiasm came back that, oh my gosh, we might have something here. And that variety, which, you know, we were so busy trying to manage the plots that it's like we didn't really take the time to step back and look at the beauty of the wheat and how wonderful and well it was actually doing. It sounds so ridiculous, but I cradled it in my arm like a little baby. Sorry. And that variety is Champlain by A.C. Berry. And so I guess it's probably pure luck that that one happens to be doing the best, although this year it didn't do so well. I just put this up here to show the yields of the crosses this year at Ben Gleason's, and the yields were very poor. In past years, and I probably should have shown that data instead, so we didn't have it tabulated all that well, you know, was up into 1,500, 2,000 pounds for some of the crosses. And so you can see that in this particular year, there wasn't any difference in yields. They were all terrible. So, but, you know, we're going to keep at it, I guess. But we are seeing some differences in protein. And I think what's interesting to me is that the crosses with Champlain seem to have the highest protein. I mean, you can see them kind of congregated at the end of the table, which is, you know, who knows if that's, seems to be real. And I'm not, this is just from Ben's, but if I had Jack's data up here as well, it's the same exact trend. So across both locations, those crosses with Champlain have higher protein. I mean, the yields are pretty poor this year, but we are definitely seeing differences in quality with the crosses.
Are you mass selecting each year and then planting the ones you select back, or the whole?
So when you, well, what do you mean mass selecting? I don't even, we're just harvesting the whole pot,
whole plot, we're not just picking
and
out
then
the best heads.
Well, no, they are, the farmers are picking out the best heads.
Okay.
We are planting those back as well in separate plots.
Oh, in separate plots?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what Steve told us to do. Actually, he told us to plant each head, but somebody took all the heads and threshed them, put them all in one thing, and so now I don't know which head's what, you know. We were going to try to guess, well, I don't, but, so, you know, I almost think not knowing and faking it a little bit is getting us somewhere.
Sure.
No? I'm sorry, plant breeders, but, I don't know. That's how you do it, too?
Walk through F5 pots, take 10 head plant out 100 heads in hedgerows, and
And that's it.
Spray it, looks good. It's matching.
Yeah, it's, like I said, so, I'm a hack. I don't even know what I'm doing, and I'm getting some information as we go, and people are excited about it. And so, our goal right now, when Steve saw that he thought we were close with maybe releasing one of these varieties, he said, well, what are you going to do next? You just can't stop. Then people are going to want to know what's coming next. And then I felt all this pressure. So then he made some more crosses for us of spring wheat from some different varieties from our variety trial. And now we have those growing out. So who in the world knows where that's going to go? But the farmers are committed. We're committed. We're making progress. And so it's really happening. And so, that's it. That's the talk. So, thank you. I can stop. I don't know if they... Oh, I can? Okay.
Any questions?
Water under the table.
How many farmers in the club now?
Well, we have a grain growers association. So the club, started actually as a club and then actually formed into the Northern Grain Growers Association. And farmers that are actually participating with the trials on their farm, there's only 2. There's more interest, but that's really what we can handle, and also what we have the seed for at this point, especially after last year.
And just mention the Northern Grain Growers Association.
Right. The Northern Grain Growers Association is an association. It is in Vermont, but it's a group of grain growers from there, and they've started their own organization, and part of what they do is this plant breeding or wheat breeding, and then also a lot of educational programs with UVM Extension. They help advise us on our research. It also includes bakers as well, and I had mentioned before we were talking about the bake tests that were done, and people are interested in getting those protocols. It's a protocol developed for bake tests with whole wheat flour. And Randy George, Jeffrey Hamelman, or Tom Leonard, or any of those folks would have those protocols.
So I have noticed on the website of the Northern Grain Growers that there are Champlain Valley, New York side growers.
There are.
Listed.
Yep.
So it's not that hard to get across Lake Champlain.
Well, I was going to say we have members from all across the country, actually. One of the benefits is a great newsletter, great workshops, good networking, and then there's something else we do. Oh, we have the great cereal grain quality testing lab that we can test for falling number, protein, and DON, and things like that.
Are you seeing a lot of variation now that you're...
We are now, yeah. We are starting to see variation now. So we just planted out the first selections that the farmers made this year, and it was just not the year. But we did see quite a bit of variation.
Heather, do you want to mention the conference?
Oh yes, we have a conference coming up on March 15th. at the Inn at Essex in Vermont. And Tom Leonard, who many people know, will be one of our guest speakers. We're doing a milling intensive. It's a 3-hour program. The real focus is on bolting and bolted flour. And then there's some on home milling, and what's the other session? I can't remember.
How it relates to quality.
And how flour quality relates to bread quality. And then Loic de Wavrin from Quebec will be our keynote, who's a very innovative grain producer. So,
Send a notice of it to Know from New York.
yeah,
Put it
we will
on our
definitely do that.
newsletter.
And there's some announcements downstairs too.
downstairs on the poster.
Can you just give us a sense of the size of your plots for your different generations?
Yeah, well, right. So now the ones that are they were the F4s this year. Gosh, they were different sizes and they were also replicated. Do you remember? They're 30 by 20 were the size of those. So that's after 4 years of growing up the seed, but they were also replicated. And we just replicate them. I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do, but we replicate them just as much seed as we have. So, and then we always save seed every year, obviously, so that we don't put it all out and lose it like we probably would have this year. And then with the selections that the farmers made, they're just these little, I don't know, like 5-foot rows.